If you're just joining us here on the Spector Creative channel in the director's commentary for MOTUC Classics, and you're expecting a Mechanic video, it's because you're watching these in the order that I post them. And, well, I absolutely admit I totally screwed up because I'm trying to record these in the order the figures were released. And I realized that I skipped over a figure that was released between Grizzlor and Buzz-Off. So if you're watching this video as part of the playlist, you're going to be seeing it in the correct order because I'm going to place it correctly into the playlist. But if you're seeing it as I post it now, well, I'm slightly out of order. So Buzz-Off should be the next figure. It should be between Grizzlor and Buzz-Off. And the figure I'm talking about is King Grayskull. And not the original release, but the second release. So why I skipped over him, I don't know. I forgot. What can I say? Doesn't mean he's not an important character, and it doesn't mean that I don't love this figure. So with all apologies out of the way, let's dive in. So the original release of King Grayskull was the very first figure in the MOTUC Classics line, and you can go back and see the video about why he got chosen, but the short version is that he was supposed to be the next 2000X figure as a way to re-kick off that line for collectors, but instead became the first figure in an all-new line, which became Classics. And he had his own unique packaging. It was a shipper box that folded out into a mini diorama of Castle Grayskull, which is different from how all the other figures shipped in a blister. So because this was the very first figure, and at the time, we kind of thought this might have just even been a one-off, the idea that it was going to continue to this huge line was shocking even to the team working on it, especially me. I thought like this was the only He-Man toy I was ever going to work on. And there were a few variants as well for the show. There was the statue variant that was the Chase version that was released at the show. I think it was like 1 out of every 10 figures. So 10% of the line, and this was based on him as a statue as he appeared in the 2000X series, which is sort of where the character was introduced. More on that in a moment. In addition to the statue version, which of course we also had a actual live or one-on-one giant statue of him at the show to help promote the exclusive, and that was a lot of fun, especially because we got to redecorate the statue year after year as different characters by putting on different heads and different armor. So, yeah, it was cool. That way, you at least knew you were getting something special at the show, and he wasn't available online, only there. The other version that I was starting to go into for the show was the Clear Spirit version. Only 31 of these were made, and these were given out to Mattel employees. The Four Horsemen got one. I got one. Yes, I do have one. And it was also auctioned off for charity, and one was raffled off at San Diego Comic-Con to a lucky fan. So this wasn't really a figure you could get, but we did do sort of an homage to this by doing a Spirit of King Grayskull late in the line as a single card release. But this didn't take away anything from wanting a single card release of the regular version. The statue was going to stay as a Comic-Con exclusive to make it special for the show, but we knew because a lot of fans missed out on the very first release of King Grayskull that they were going to want to have him in their collection. I usually don't like to repeat figures. I kind of feel like it's a rule that, when you do a figure, you don't just re-release the figure in slightly different deco because that's basically going to cause the torches and pitchforks to arise, and I had enough of that with fans already coming after me for different things. But in this case, I definitely wanted to break my own rules because, as I said, King Grayskull was the very first figure, and at the time of his release, not only was he limited in the sense of his run was actually much smaller than your average MOTUC Classics figure, but he was a very important figure in the lore and the storytelling, and a lot of folks either weren't at the show, didn't get him, or didn't know that this was going to be the start of a whole new line. And as I said, he didn't actually technically start in the 2000X show because there was a Spirit of King Grayskull in the original mini-comics, and in fact one panel in the mini-comics actually showed the king, the former king of Castle Grayskull. Granted, it was kind of in shadow, but it allowed us to use this on the card art on the back of the single card release. So it was kind of cool to have that, the very first appearance or the first art of King Grayskull ever from the mini-comic, which eventually became the character in the 2000X show, who rode around on Battle Lion. And, whether or not the people in the mini-comics or the people working on 2000X actually even connected these as the same character, well, we did, and that was cool. So, yeah, we made them the same character. It's all part of what made Classics cool, is tying things together. So the re-release. So a redecoed re-release of King Grayskull came out as a single-carded figure, and obviously as a fan myself, as a collector, I wanted to avoid making people angry with that whole just different enough to make you angry thing that happens sometimes where figures get re-released with slightly upgraded paint deco, and you feel like, oh, I have to get it to have a complete collection, but it really isn't that different. So I wanted to do everything I could to avoid this. And we did this in a couple ways when we upgraded him for his single release, and some of it was redeco, some of it was using new materials, and a lot of it was giving him new accessories that could be very dramatic and make it worth buying him again, basically, if he was going to be back. We wanted people to feel like they were getting something worthwhile. They weren't just getting a redeco for redeco's sake. So one thing we did was we brightened the colors. He had a much brighter red cape, and he had a much whiter fluff on top of his cape, which of course led many fans to think that we were trying to do a Santa Claus action figure because of the white fluff on red cape. And while yes, I know this is the signature outfit of Santa Claus, this was honestly never even occurred to us until fans started saying this, saying like, oh, you're just selling us a Santa Claus action figure without the beard. I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even see that, but I can see why you think that. But no, this was not meant to be He-Man as Santa Claus. That's best left for other fan customs, especially if you take into account the He-Man and She-Ra holiday special. The other thing we did, besides brightening the colors, was we gave him some really cool accessories. That blue orb he's holding, as well as a full version of the sword. And the white on the back of his cape was flocked. That's that soft material that makes a surface kind of felt-like. Sometimes you see this on flamingos out in the lawn. People have a habit of flocking them. But He-Man fans probably know this best from either Christmas trees or Panther. So Panther was flocked in the original release. And although that was just a flocking version of Battle Cat, the same tool, just with flock applied, who was just a repaint of the Big Jim on the Tiger Trail Tiger, who was then a repaint of the Tarzan Panther Jungle Cat. Yes, this tool has had a long history with Mattel, but Panther was the flocked version, and that's what we did to King Grayskull's cape. The top of it, the white part, had white flock on it, just to make it, again, different. The other thing that we did is I'm really big into storytelling and using action figures as a means to actually tell a story, not just be part of the content. And that's where the accessories came from. So King Grayskull came with this blue orb. And you're probably saying, oh, yay, now we can play marbles. Well, yeah, you could. But there was a story and there was a payoff. When we did Hero, who was our second-year Comic-Con figure, he came with a bright blue sword. Now, the sword actually originally wasn't blue. The Four Horsemen did the sword kind of in a cosmic black with sort of a star field. And while I like this approach, this was one of the few times that I sort of vetoed them and had them make it blue because I wanted that sword to help tell the story of how the energy from the sword was going to flow into the orb to form the orb. And then that was part of the whole passing from King Grayskull to He-Man was the sword that could then sync up with the orb. So we gave King Grayskull this really cool version of the sword that was half translucent, as if the energy is flowing out of it into the orb. It was like literally telling a story with an accessory. And then, of course, he came with the orb himself, which was the first ever purchase part, meaning it was not tooled. We didn't tool it. We just bought it. It was an existing sphere that we just cast in see-through blue plastic, which was cool because it saves on the tooling bill. We didn't have to tool it. We just bought it. That doesn't happen that much, but it's great when you can get a purchase part in there. And, of course, there were a few ways to display the orb. Castle Grayskull came with an orb stand, and this was also replicated in the Mega Bloks version of the Castle Grayskull that was really cool because it came with an orb stand as well. And then we released a Temple of Darkness Sorceress in 2012 who came with a full, or sort of a half, up-to-your-waist body stand, as opposed to the one with Grayskull, which was a short stand, and that could also hold the orb. So it was a great way of sort of paying off previous figures. King Grayskull came with the orb, and this new version of the Sorceress, which we'll be getting to in time, came with the stand. And then, of course, the finale of the storytelling was actually the package, where we changed it up a little bit and had King Grayskull separating the sword in two, and you saw the crackling energy between it. And that's something we'd never done before on the package. So, again, a really cool way to use an action figure to tell part of the story of where the energy of Grayskull came from. And now, for fans who missed out on the original release, you had a King Grayskull to go with your other Preternia figures that we were slowly building that up as a faction. Eventually we got to Eldor and Vina, who was the original sorceress, King Grayskull's wife. So, yeah, I mean, it was great. I don't like reissuing figures with that whole, just different enough. But in this case, because so many people missed the original release, it felt right to do that, as well as to release the Spirit version as a glow-in-the-dark figure later in the line. So this way, everyone had their chance to get King Grayskull, who was a very important character in the lore, and the line was better for it.